time, and let's start the show.
All right. Well,
And
folks, it's good to be with you again. And as I say each week, sometimes our internet service develops glitches. So far, we haven't had them. But if for some reason Richard doesn't come through, please wait on the line for a minute, and it should self-correct. And as usual, we have a lot of interesting stuff to talk about today. Here are the top 9 Richard picked for this week. For our top news story, Tesla has big plans to become the dominant country for electric vehicles and their batteries, showing how, says Richard, a disruptive new technology can just take over a market. For our coronavirus story, we still have a lot we don't know. And so we cannot know how the virus will end until we know these things. For our technology story, scientists are wowed by a language generation's program's ability to write articles, produce code, and compose poetry. That's a language generation. Nobody doing it. For our material story, there's a new composite material that can handle more electric current for more advanced electric vehicles. And for our flight in space and that kind of stuff story, the mission now going to Mars has a 3-agent robotic system for exploration and science. For our environment story, even if Paris climate goals are met, the melting Antarctic ice that's already in there will raise sea level by 2.5 meters.
Wow.
So much for New York.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
For our
Yeah.
biology story, biologists have created new genetic systems to neutralize the spread of genes. So antibiotics, where is that coming? For the story of us, the human story, billionaire Chuck Feeney has achieved his goal of giving away his fortune. And for our health medical
Wow.
story, synthetic antibiotics can outmaneuver resistant bacteria. So, Richard, what's this about Tesla having big plans to become the dominant country for electric vehicles and their batteries?
well, it really is interesting. Last week, he had what he called Battery Day. And in the Battery Day, he presented his plans for the next 10 years just for battery technology. And I'll talk about it and show you some of the highlights. The first thing, that over 10 years, he's going to increase battery production by a factor of 30. So that's a big increase. He also, when he's doing his battery production, part of his planning is to have every factory located where they're fairly close distances from the supplier of raw material. So he's cutting down the energy footprint of his factory by not having to ship stuff around the world. So it's like he's heard that there is a problem and he's dealing with it. When you do that and have shorter supply lines, then also it brings the cost down. And that's a big deal. Part of what they're doing is, this is an example of what you can do when a technology is still fairly new. And these automotive batteries are still in a very early part of their life cycle. And as you make more of them, you get better at it, and you have all of these efficiencies that happen. And so their factory that makes batteries, in the 10 years from now, they will cost 75% less per kilowatt of produced battery. So the cost of the factory will be about a quarter of what it is now. And the factory will be in a 10 times smaller footprint. So they're getting more production out of the same space. And he's actually doing many fairly amazing manufacturing tricks. Like one of the ways that he is doing this is the batteries are on some kind of line moving through the factory, and while they're moving through the factory, they're actually working on the batteries and doing what they have to do to fill them and put the electrodes on them and stuff like this. So while they're moving, he's still working on them. So it's a lot of clever things that he's doing. And he says in about 3 years, then the powertrain for the electric vehicle, and that's the motor transmission, and getting the power out to the wheels, will cost less than an internal combustion engine. So in about 3 years, then the cost of your EV will be less than the purchase price of an equivalent internal combustion engine. And of course, its operating costs and maintenance costs are much lower. So the stuff he's doing, I think, one of the things that's happening is he is remaking the automotive industry, and the guys like Ford and General Motors and Fiat and Nissan have real trouble competing with what he's doing, because he's not just making the cars, he's making the batteries, and the batteries are a significant part of the price of the cars. The other thing that he is doing by this big increase in production, it's at such a scale that it is going to make the movement to electrical vehicles and to green power inevitable. So the transportation and power generation are half of the pollution in the air every year. And so the stuff that he is doing is these specific kinds of things that moves transportation and energy into carbon neutral areas of life. So this is an enormous thing in terms of the environmental impacts as well. So that's what Tesla is up to, and it can happen so fast, again, because he is using new technology that is better at doing this stuff than the old technology, and better means, among other things, a lot cheaper. So it's going to win. So here we go.
Any comments?
Yes. I'm driving a Nissan Leaf, which is a totally electrical car. I plug it in the evening, and I have about 100-mile range, about 160 kilometer range next morning. And it's just wonderful. You drive by all the gas station, you don't worry about the gas. And if we were allowed to have roof solar cells, I could probably charge it from that instead of from the grid.
So that's you are showing how effective these vehicles are for actual basic transportation. One of the things that Tesla didn't talk about that I know somebody at Tesla is thinking about, what about the two-seater version of his electric vehicle that only, like yours, has to go 100 miles but on a charge. So that means that needs a quarter of the battery pack, and maybe he can make a two-seater and sell it for $10,000 or something. Wouldn't that be great?
Well, you can buy a used electric vehicle. I think I paid about $15,000 for 2016 Nissan Leaf with 30,000 miles on it. So they're really, if you buy a used one, it's very, it's not expensive. No.
One of the things that's going to happen that hasn't shown up in the market yet is the resale prices for used gas engine cars is going to drop like mad, because who wants to buy one of those gas guzzlers when there's another alternative?
Yeah.
Johannes, would you like to have your vehicle just the way it is now, or would you like it to be self-driving?
Not self-driving for a while, but since I'm approaching 81, maybe there'll be a break-even point.
Right, yes.
Any other comments? Okay, moving on to our coronavirus story. Richard, what are all these things we don't know? And so we can't tell when the virus is going to end because we don't know them.
Well, it's like this. Excuse me while I fiddle around and get the right thing on the screen. Okay, here we are. It turns out that what we don't know presently is really the strength or duration of any kind of immunity to COVID or from a vaccine. And until you know about what the duration of this immunity is, either from a natural one or the vaccine, it's impossible to know what the future is going to be. If the immunity is not strong, then it will be excuse me while I'm trying to do something with the screen, and I should just talk and not worry about it. If the immunity is not strong, then it's likely what we will have is continued recurrences of the epidemic. And if the immunity is stronger, then we're going to have a virus that we will end up being able to contain. And the only problem is that they don't know yet, and it will be some time before they know. So we still have a future that is uncertain, even with viruses looking like they're coming. And again, different vaccines will likely have different effects on long-term immunity too. So it's a whole bunch of things that we don't know, and until we know them, you don't know what's going to happen. So that's where we are.
Any comments?
I have one thing. Am I on?
You're on.
Am I on? I'm sorry. I just think it's sort of fascinating. You know, all the things that we're hearing and you're reading every day, something different. You know, I mean, there's one thing, one of the articles saying, okay, forget touching anything. You know, it's all coming, you know, through the air. I mean, you know, I've been cleaning these lousy hands. You know, I just got back from the grocery store. You know, it's like, oh my God, you know? But I think it's fascinating because I think probably everything that they have to go through when they get a new virus, this is how they figure it out. Except now it's being done on Facebook.
Right.
And we hear it every, you know, I mean, just like with all these articles, we're hearing, okay, this is good, this isn't good, this is, you know, and I think I'm fascinated by it.
Well, it's interesting from the science viewpoint, and we're seeing science in kind of living color real time.
Yeah, yeah.
One comment, Richard. They say that wearing a mask will also, or might protect you against the flu. So that's a positive.
You think it'll become the new style?
It already is. You should see my wife.
Yeah, I've started to color coordinate.
Yes. I want a mask that has a pin-on set of lips that if you have them one direction, they're smiling, and if you
Yes.
turn them over, they're frowning.
Yes, yes.
Any other thoughts?
It wasn't a thought, but I was wondering if anybody else has read or heard this. I think I read it somewhere that Fiji has now got a virus that's worse than the coronavirus.
Fiji. I heard something about that, but I don't know any more about
Fiji,
it.
The Fiji has a real problem with with bacteria that are drug resistant. And I sent an article around a week or two about that, and maybe it's one of these things that is breeding in Fiji, and they don't know why Fiji is this hot spot, but it is.
I'll be interested in seeing what happens during the flu season.
Yes.
I mean, with all this hand washing,
Yeah.
maybe we will eliminate the flu as a side effect. I mean, we certainly should, for crying out loud.
Now,
you know.
There's got to be some benefit from all of that, eh?
Yes. Now, it turns out the coronavirus, another member of the coronavirus family, is one of the viruses that causes the common cold. And there are some guys that are working on a vaccine for all coronaviruses. And if that's successful, maybe we'll start to have a vaccine for the common cold.
I don't think the pharmaceutical companies will like that at all.
I'm sure you're right.
I don't think so. That will never roll.
Okay.
Okay, Richard, then if we're moving along, what's this program that can generate language that has the ability to write articles, produce code, and compose poetry?
This is the latest production of a company that is a for-profit company, and the company's name is OpenAI. And they have a new language generation program they call GPT-3, and GPT means generative pre-trained transformer 3. I see why they use the abbreviation. And this, like they say here, I have a quote on this slide that is something that GPT-3 said. It says, "I have created a voice for the unknown human who hides within the binary." And it turns out that this thing also is able to generate computer code and poetry and the full quote that it said before, I have created a writer, a sculptor, an artist, and this writer will be able to create words to give life to emotion, to create character. I will not see it myself, but some other humans will. And so I will be able to create a poet greater than any that I have ever encountered. So we have not only a language generating computer, but to me, it sounds a little arrogant.
Yeah.
A little.
Yeah.
And, you know, it uses a kind of,
Yay!
it uses a kind of logical system that isn't the edge of what they are doing in AI. And this shows in computers one of the advantages of power. So this is a big machine, and this machine, instead of being trained, it educated itself. Okay, and to educate it itself, then it looked at, got 3 billion words from Wikipedia, 400 billion from other web pages, and about 100 billion from digitized books. And so that's what it's read to kind of understand language and writing and stuff. And now it can generate, as I say, computer code. It can create poetry that captures the rhythm and style of some writer. So you could have it creating Shakespeare or E.E. Cummings. And one of the things they wonder about this, the OpenAI company that has developed this has not released it to the market yet because they're afraid of it and what it will do. They've talked to GPT-3 about it, and GPT-3 assures them that it is no threat, but they're still afraid of it. And it also shows some of the problems we have with jobs. One of the places in the newsroom of television stations and newspapers and magazines, you have all of these guys writing articles about things. And they told GPT-3 to write an article about the breakup of the Methodist Church. And this was its beginnings. After 2 days of intense debate, the United Methodist Church has agreed to a historic split, one that's expected to end in the creation of a new denomination, and one that will be theologically and socially conservative, according to the Washington Post.
Wow.
Wow. Can I ask you 2 questions? Richard?
Sure.
How many languages does it speak?
I don't know.
But more than one?
Maybe right now the stuff they train, I think they trained it on English to begin with, but there's no reason you should have to restrict it to English.
You mentioned all those words. There are not that many words in the English language.
But there are, if you read every article in Wikipedia.
Oh, you mean total of times
Yes.
a word is spoken?
Yes.
Or written, okay.
Yes, yes. So that's kind of its sample data set, was the entire content of Wikipedia and every online book it could find and the internet.
Well, can you read us a sample? Did they give you? Are there
They
any?
had more samples of it. It's not within the article that I have here. There was a sample from it that I sent around 2 or 3 weeks ago without realizing who wrote the article. But I sent another article around that was, 400 or 500 words, and for me, it was indistinguishable from human writing. And
No poetry.
I don't have any samples of the poetry. It's done poetry. And I bet if you search for GPT-3 poetry,
Oh,
you'll
yeah.
find it.
Okay.
And
Thanks.
anyway, so it's a different world. Now, they didn't talk about it in this article, but like they have used GPT-3 to be able to generate text, there is another version that they are working on to be able to have it be able to generate images.
Wow.
So
if it can learn Shakespeare, it could probably learn my technique for writing.
I'm
I mean,
sure.
my writing technique.
Sure. And it could write the novel that you always had in your mind but weren't able to finish.
Well, that's a good point. I was thinking more about college term papers. Imagine those kids.
Oh,
Holy
God.
smoke.
Yes.
Wow.
That's right. And so
apparently there's been a huge increase in cheating with coronavirus and doing everything from your home place.
Oh.
And like, how, if you're doing things online, how can somebody tell whether you did it or not?
Well,
Right. Right.
And there are plagiarism programs that will take an article or something and then check it against a big database of other written material. But GPT ought to know about that and then also be able to give you something that would pass any plagiarism tester.
That's amazing.
Now, the thing that I think is connected to this in some way that I think is got an insidious possibility is, these internet companies are collecting all of this data about us, and they're using the data basically to be able to sell us things. And when they have something like this GPT-3, they will be able to look, see, hey, that's Richard, check their database that knows more about me than I know about myself, and then have their GPT-3 on the fly create an ad just for me that pushes all my hot buttons.
Incredible.
So that's I'm afraid that is part of our future. And since we live in the kind of society we do, expect to have very targeted ads sometime soon.
Sure. I'm sure that's the first thing that will be used. Yeah.
So if we move on to materials, what's this new composite material that can handle much more electric current that can, for example, be good for new electric vehicles?
Now, this shows to me, the degree to which they are looking broadly at electric vehicles. You wouldn't think about wires being a limiting factor unless you started to deal with power electronics. I spent some of the time in that in an earlier life. And what they have done is they have figured out how to make from carbon nanotubes and copper sheets, some combination structure which is lightweight and more conductive, and it increases the power handling capability not by a lot, but about 15%. That 15% translates into smaller motors that can travel further on the amount of energy they have. So it has an efficiency that can go through all of the electrical systems and improve the performance of many different things. And to me, it shows how far they're thinking. Who'd have thought of high-tech wire?
Any thoughts?
I wonder how much power is lost in the power grid itself, the wires, that go for miles and miles. There's going to be some loss of power.
Yes.
Wires.
Yeah, it's not enormous, but it's 10 or 15% around the world. And if you look at 10 or 15%, that is a lot.
I'm wondering about the article you sent us about Tel Aviv's.
Those streets, yeah.
Yeah, is that a new material?
I don't know.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Yeah. Oh, I think it was you.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
No, anyway.
Can you hear me?
Oh, well, let's move on then.
Okay. Now, in terms of flight and all that, the mission now going to Mars has a new robotic system for exploration with 3 agents in it. Well, what is this about?
Now, that's a little bit of a misstatement. The 2020 Mars expedition has a 2-agent system, and one is the rovers that we're now familiar with, and the other is a helicopter. And they have it set up for the 2 to work together because it's good to know where the rover is going, because that way you can avoid obstacles and go to good stuff. And they have designed for the next mission a 3-agent system that will include a satellite that's taking pictures from space of the area. And the reason that will be particularly useful is, the Mars atmosphere is real thin. So to make a helicopter work, the helicopter's blades have to go really around fast.
Yeah.
And it's powered by a battery, a solar battery, of course. And what that means is it doesn't have much range until it's got to sit down again and recharge. And so if you're able to look from space and see where you're going, you'll be able to get a lot better use out of your helicopter rover combination than this next mission will have. So that's the idea. And again, the work that the scientists and engineers are doing to figure out all of this stuff, they're solving a problem that none of us have heard of, which is how much flight time you get out of your Mars helicopter.
Never worried about it.
That's right. And so that doesn't affect us, but there's some guys who that really bothers. Okay.
Moving on to environment. Now, I imagine most people listening think that we're not going to meet our Paris climate goals. But even if we did, apparently it's all baked in that the melting Antarctic ice will raise sea level by 2.5 meters. What's that about?
Well, that 8-foot rise in sea level is a problem. Like you say, what about New York?
Yes.
So, you know, I'm imagining somebody coming up to me and saying, "Hey, mister, want to buy some oceanfront property cheap?" And so this melting is not going to happen immediately. It'll happen, they think, through this century and into the next century. So it's not going to happen overnight.
Okay.
But this is what happens even if the current world plan is successful. If it's not successful, and say the temperature rise is 4 degrees C, then half of the water on the planet is in ice in Antarctica. Half of the world's fresh water, is on Antarctica, and some of it is floating on the water, and when that melts, it doesn't make much difference about sea level, but most of it is on islands on the continent of Antarctica and is above ground. And so anyway, if we have 4 degrees C rise, then instead of 8 feet, then certainly there will be 20 feet rise just from that ice. And so all of this stuff speaks to enormous problems through the world. And with this 8-foot sea rise, can you imagine all the places that are going to have trouble? And it's not just New York City or New Orleans. Think about the state of Florida.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
And think about places like Bangladesh that are already, almost just at sea level.
Yep.
Venice.
So there will be hundreds of millions of people all over the world that are displaced by the rising oceans.
Holland may be the first country.
I have to unmute it.
It's already below sea level.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
What was that, Loretta?
I said Holland.
Oh, yeah. I was
yes,
gonna mention
Holland.
that. Yeah, I was
Right.
gonna mention that, yeah. Venice.
Yes. So, and in America, they, one thing I read a few months ago says that there is likely to be coming a $1 trillion write-down of beachfront property. So this has real problems. People in America are still buying beachfront property, however. So I don't know if that's optimistic or short-sighted or stupid. Pick one from the list.
They just don't think it'll be in their lifetime, that's all.
Okay. So this.
All right. So
This is what I will you is my underwater property.
I am sitting in a little area called Breezy Point, New York. And it's a little peninsula. And I think we're probably like 1/8 of a mile from the ocean. And I think this little peninsula might be a half mile wide.
Okay.
So we're pretty nervous. No, I'm pretty nervous.
Well, you have beachfront property.
The area is very, very conservative. So therefore, they don't believe in any kind of global warming. And yet the ocean is like coming closer and closer.
Uh-huh.
So
So
But
you say they're conservative, that means somehow they don't believe in the public good?
they do believe in the public good, but they're not about to do anything to maybe stop
Okay,
the changes
okay.
because they don't believe it is human made or whatever.
Anyway,
So,
we'll see.
mhm.
Okay, Richard, what's this biology story about gene drives and neutralize the spread of genes? What's that about?
This is often we have stories that are at the edge of my understanding about things, and this is kind of one. The basic story is in the last few years, our clever genetic engineers have developed a technology they call gene drive. And this gene drive is using biological tricks to create some genetic change and then drive that genetic change through the population. So that's where you get the name gene drive. They think that this is so far, the gene drive is just in the lab. It has not been let loose on the planet yet. And they have big hopes for it. And the big hopes include things like wiping out malaria, wiping out dengue, many of the diseases that plague people around the world, they think can be stopped by genetic tricks, and they can use the gene drive to drive it through the population. That's the good side. Where this story is about is it turns out that people are kind of frightened about releasing new genetic elements, loosing them on the planet. And what'll happen? Remember those rabbits in Australia? Bad things can happen, unexpected things can happen when you do this. So what the scientists have tried to figure out is some way where they can do yet another biological fix and stop the gene drives from spreading in its tracks. So you've heard about weapons. So first you develop one weapon and then you develop the anti-weapon. This is, to me, is kind of like what they're doing here with the gene drive. Gene drive is a weapon against disease and stuff worldwide, but we have to have some way to stop the weapon in case it gets out of control. And now they've got one of them. They have two different ways to do it. And because now they have the two different ways to do it, what we're going to hear about next is some gene drive thing that they're actually trying to implement in the world. So this is news ahead of the news. And you heard it here on Hot Science.
Well, don't start using the anti-drive gene drive until they get rid of cucarachas, because I don't know that there's a really good use for those things.
Okay. Well, they're going to live longer than us, so they're going to inherit the world after the humans are extinct.
Not if we stick that gene drive on them.
Okay. Well, okay. We can use it to make them smart.
Ooh.
No,
Make
you
them dead.
don't want to have smart. You don't
I
want
want
to have.
dead cucaracha. The only good cucaracha is a dead.
They seem like they're pretty smart already.
Yeah,
Yes.
they are. They're smart enough now.
So, Richard, why should we be delighted that a billionaire achieves his goal of giving away his fortune?
Well, this story, I think, has several parts of it. The first part of it is this is Chuck Feeney, who's given away $8 billion. Have you ever heard of him?
Never.
Has anybody here ever heard of him?
No.
How did
No.
he get his money? How did he get his money?
Oh, he got his money, you know, those airport duty-free shops?
Mm.
Yeah.
He's the guy who started that business.
Oh, yeah.
And so it turns out he made a enormous pile of money from that. And the reason why I asked if anybody had ever heard of him is that part of what he was trying to do is not only give all his money away, but to do it where he was anonymous, where it wasn't something to feed his ego and make him think, oh, everybody love him because he's such a generous guy, but it was to give it away. He says wealth brings responsibility, and he felt like enormous wealth brings enormous responsibility. And in addition to feeling it, he did something about it. He now is 89, and he is very happy. He's achieved his life goal. It took 40 years to give that much money away, and he made a foundation, and now the foundation has dissolved because all of their money is gone. And it turns out that you know, he was never telling other billionaires that you should do this too, but he was setting an example for them. And because of his example, Bill Gates and Warren Buffett have started an organization, the Giving Pledge. And the Giving Pledge goes to the world's richest people who agree that they will give away half of their wealth to charity. And Buffett describes Feeney as, quote, my hero and Bill Gates's hero. And he's setting such a wonderful example. One of the things he says is, quote, how many yachts or pairs of shoes do you need? So, you know, this man is my hero too, I believe, and I've never heard of him. He's 89. He lives in a small rented apartment in San Francisco. He doesn't have a car. He lives very humbly, and he is happy. And he says to people who would think about giving away their money to do it when you are alive. Don't wait till after you're dead. You would be surprised, he says, how happy it makes you.
Any thoughts?
I think it's nice for somebody super.
Whoops, what happened to him?
He went away. Hello.
Sorry. I just got a call coming in. I think it's great to give money away, but how efficient is it? Instead of a system, perhaps more socialized, where the state can help distribute the money to the people who knows it.
Say it again.
Yeah.
Never give money to the state.
Why not? I mean, this works.
Give them to NGOs. They don't manage their money well.
That is not true, and I can give you an example. The little country of Denmark with 5.5 million. Supposedly, they have the happiest people in the world. They also have one of the highest taxes. So people don't have to worry about, can my kids get an education? Do I have health care? So it does work if it's done the right way.
Now, depends on the government you're giving it to.
Right.
I personally would not like to give Trump billions of dollars.
Right.
He would use it to style his hair.
Or build the wall.
Yeah.
If I read the article that you sent around, and it seems like Feeney had decided that education was important, which is something that I am not sure governments rush into so quickly.
And
so go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say what you were going to say.
Oh, great. Okay. Finish it then.
Again, he gave about half of the 8 billion he gave to educational organizations around the world.
And apparently, some organizations are much more effective at distributing it according to the goals than others.
Right.
Like there is an organization called Effective Altruism that tries to rank charities, and they say in terms of actually delivering something, some charities are 1,000 times more effective than others.
Yes.
And so if you were wanting to see what some of these people who are really examining this carefully, effective altruism is a way of trying to get a sense of what kind of things can be done to be more effective in what you want to achieve.
That's a good reference, Fred. Thank you.
I think it's important to focus on another aspect of the article, and that is that he said, don't wait until you're dead to give it away, but do it because it makes me feel so good. I think there have been real studies on people, you know, to see changes in their psychology and the emotional, you know, measuring these things that really do show that, yes, indeed, it makes you feel physically better as well as emotionally better to give.
They have studied also generosity in terms of its impact on the brain. And generosity is one of the things that actually makes your brain grow.
Yeah.
That's important for us old folks because we're in a stage of life where every year our brain gets a little smaller, except for Fred.
Yeah.
So we can buy brain power, basically.
That's right, and be happy while you're doing it.
Right.
Okay, Richard, for our final story about health and all that kind of stuff. We've heard a lot about antibiotics and no longer being useful because bacteria are resistant. Now, what's this about synthesizing things to outmaneuver the resistant bacteria?
This is some very clever work, and it's a product of synthetic biology, and synthetic biology is where basically humans are re-engineering biological organisms. And synthetic biology is going to be one of the things that's an enormous big deal in the rest of our lifetime in this century. Anyway, and what they have done here is a real clever idea, I think. You know, there are you've heard of the bacteria that are resistant to antibiotics, of course. That's where the problem is in the US. That brings about many tens of thousands of deaths every year due to diseases that we no longer have an antibiotic for. And what these clever guys are doing is we used to have antibiotics, but then the disease evolved some technique where the antibiotic no longer works. So what they are doing, their approach is they are looking at antibiotics that used to work, and they're looking at the bacteria on which they used to work and figuring out what the bacteria evolved to make them resistant to that antibiotic, and then figuring out some way to re-engineer the cellular structure of the biotic to make the resistance no longer resistant. And here, the first thing that they have done is there's a class of antibiotics called streptogammins, which were very effective and then no longer became effective. And they, using the latest kind of tools, made three-dimensional photographs, if you will, of the bacteria, the part of the bacteria that they were attacking, the structure in the bacteria that gave them resistance to the antibiotic, and then tweaked the antibiotic in some ways that they can control. So they would try a bunch of different antibiotics, and then they tried that on the disease, and the best one they found was 10 times better than any present antibiotic against its target. So what they have been able to do basically is figure out a way, instead of inventing new antibiotics, just tweaking existing antibiotics to where they are now effective again. And, you know, they have more big plans. They have proven it in the first case, and I'm sure there are follow-on cases that are already going on, because now they have a solid methodology and a real clever approach.
Very interesting. Any thoughts?
It would have to be a continuing battle as new mutations develop. So, you know, forever and ever, they would have to have this system.
Right, and this gives them a way to continue to do that development.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it turns, when you start to understand it at the level that they are dealing with, you know, bacteria have a genetic structure. That genetic structure has a three-dimensional shape, and so much of how they work has to do with topology. So the shape needs something that fits in it, and then it'll do its job. And they know this now. They know how to know this. It's amazing.
Any other thoughts?
Oh, this is the problem. This,
if not,
Margot, solves the thing for Fiji, because Fiji is where we're getting all the resistant bacteria from. And we just need to move these guys to the island.
So, Richard, once again, thank you so much. Thanks, everybody, for participating.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Hopefully, we'll see you in a week's time.
Okay.
Very good. Good to see you, folks.
Thank you all.
Fred,
Adios.
Can you stay on for a second?
Yes.
Sure.
Yes.
Fred and Richard.
Yes.
Sure.
You know Hugh and Claire and Jenny?
Yes.
Yes. Well, you probably don't know, but maybe you do if you keep in contact with them.